Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about the rules of abbreviations. We've all seen and used them, and depending on our age, we might use them to communicate with our teenagers. But are the rules the same for LOL as they are for NASA? Not quite. In written communications, abbreviation is the process or result of representing a word or group of words by a shorter form of the word or phrase. Abbreviations take many forms and can be found in ancient Greek inscriptions and medieval manuscripts. However, the information explosion of the 20th century made using abbreviations a more common practice. A primary reason to use abbreviations is that of brevity. Much of the information is often redundant in many scholarly and scientific communications, making abbreviations possible and convenient. Another factor in the development of abbreviations is the proliferation of new products and organizations that need to be named. This became even more prevalent with the growth of email and other types of online communication, where many abbreviated forms came into use in the beginning of the 1990s. As people began sending text messages, the early days of the cell phone and that awkward numerical keypad resulted in a new and highly truncated language. All abbreviations are not the same, though. There are acronyms and initialisms. Technically, they're all ways to shorten phrases and ideas, both in everyday language and through texting and email. But what is the difference? An abbreviation is a way to shorten a phrase. Many standard abbreviations shorten the word referenced by shortening the word, but not creating a brand new one. Here are some examples of basic abbreviations. An acronym is a type of abbreviation that shortens a phrase by combining the first letter or letters of each word in the phrase to form a new pronounceable word. Here are some acronym examples like NASA, FOMO, radar, and SCUBA. An initialism is another abbreviation, kind of like an acronym, but not exactly the same. Initialisms also use the first letter of each word in the phrase, but instead of combining the letters to form a new word, with like with NASA, you pronounce each letter individually. Here are some examples, like FBI, NFL, AM and PM, and RSVP. Some more recent initialisms that are more popular these days are phrases often used in email and texting, such as ROFL, BRB, and JK. I'm sure you've all seen these. So now that we're clear on the types, here are some rules for writers and editors to remember. You need to introduce them with parentheses. The first time you use an abbreviation, it's important to spell out the full term and put the abbreviation in parentheses. Then you can just use that abbreviation moving forward in your communication. Only abbreviate well-known terms. Before you use an abbreviation, you should double check that the term is well known with your audience. Here are some common abbreviations, such as ASAP and DCAF. And well-known companies or organizations can also go by abbreviations because people honestly maybe wouldn't know what the full name was anyway. Don't use articles with acronyms, usually. Take a look at these two sentences. She works for the CIA. He works for NASA. Why does one require the article the and the other one didn't? It all comes down to the difference in initialisms and acronyms. When dealing with an initialism, where you utter each letter individually, you should insert an article before it. Which one? The general rule for indefinite articles is to use a before consonant sounds and an before vowel sounds. Use the definite article with an initialism if the written out term would begin with the. For example, the CEO. If it's an acronym, you usually won't need an article unless it's being used as an adjective, such as the NASA control room. Should you use a period? Not necessarily. There's no strict rule about putting periods after each letter in an acronym or initialism. Some publications put periods after each letter, arguing that periods are necessary because each letter is an abbreviation for a word. Other publications don't put them after each letter, reasoning that the copy looks cleaner without them, and that because they're made up of all capital letters, the fact they're abbreviations is implied. The main thing for writers and editors to keep in mind is consistency. A good tip is to keep your style handbook nearby and follow the rules of that particular style. So, how about those LOLs, JKs, and LMKs? Using them in emails amongst colleagues is one thing. Using them in a professional memo company-wide is another. While these terms have become more mainstream, they should typically be avoided in professional communication. They tend to be too informal and can seem unprofessional if overused. So, are there social justice issues to consider with abbreviations? In some ways, yes. Something to consider when using abbreviations is that they can unfairly alienate specific audiences. In some cases, acronyms can confuse unfamiliar readers, and even well-intentioned writers and editors may wrongly assume an audience's familiarity. Acronyms can make life more complicated for people who are new to an organization, a community or culture, or a language. They can be used as a kind of code to make people feel part of a group or in group, but in turn, they can make people who don't know them feel excluded from the team. Abbreviations shouldn't be avoided entirely, but using them as a default can be problematic. Okay, so here's a recap. Abbreviations are meant to shorten words or phrases to speed up communication. Acronyms and initialisms are types of abbreviations. An acronym is formed when you combine the first letters of a phrase to create a new word, and an initialism is formed when you combine the first letters of a phrase but say the individual letters. Hopefully this was a helpful description of the many rules of abbreviation. LMK if you have any questions.